David Miller never felt ashamed of his work and believed that he was doing a necessary job for the good of society. Being a forensic pathologist at the morgue, he was used to spending his days facing death, which took on a new guise each time. Sometimes it was death from natural causes, while in other cases, a clearly criminal nature of the incident was evident. Each specific case required a unique approach. That was David's task, to figure out whether each particular death was natural or if the cause required an investigation. David's acquaintances only shook their heads, unable to understand how he could work in such an unpleasant place. But the man himself didn't mind it, since he was never afraid of difficulties and knew his responsibilities were very important and he had to perform them diligently. Even when the police officers stopped by, they couldn't help but ask him, "How can you have lunch or drink coffee here?" To which David always replied, "Well, I don't eat in here. This room has to be kept sterile." He had long grown used to such questions and stopped paying attention to them. However, few people in David's life knew that he dreamed of becoming a musician when he was little and could even play the piano very well. The boy's delicate, graceful fingers were perfect for it, and his teachers unanimously predicted a great career as a pianist for him. The Miller family couldn't be happier about such a prospect. David's mother was especially excited about it, since she used to study music herself, but never achieved any particular success in the field, and now placed high hopes on her son. "Mom, what if I don't succeed in becoming a musician? Or what if I change my mind?" David inquired cautiously. Samantha Davis raised an eyebrow in surprise. "What do you mean, change your mind? We've been teaching you to love music ever since you were born. Even when you were just a baby, I'd play works by famous composers, and judging by the smile on your face, you really enjoyed them." After this kind of argument from his mother, David usually withdrew him to himself and tried to steer the conversation in another direction. Time went by, and the older David got, the more doubtful he became of the choice of his career path. It's hard to say what would have become of the boy's future if he hadn't met a woman named Monica one day. Her parents moved their family to Boston in search of a better life. They used to live in a neighboring state and worked in the field of medicine. It was Monica who awakened David's interest in medicine by telling him stories about the peculiarities of her father's profession. "Mom, what if I were to become a doctor, a surgeon? It's a prestigious job, not worse than being a pianist or a composer," the young man suggested cautiously. Mrs. Miller frowned. "Son, I thought we made this decision a long time ago, and now you're opening this discussion again? Becoming a surgeon isn't easy. Trust me, it requires a lot of studying. Are you willing to put in so much effort?" "I am, Mom. Monica says I'd be great at it, and also her dad's fingers are just as long as mine. He believes that it's an important quality for a surgeon. Monica supports me and also plans to apply to medical school," David replied without any doubt. Samantha Miller looked quietly at her son and shook her head. Only then did she realize that David had finally developed his own opinion. Time flew by, making adjustments to the lives of the Miller family members. By the time he finished high school, David had definitely made up his mind about becoming a surgeon and virtually stopped playing the piano. Despite the fact that he went to prom with Monica, their relationship didn't develop any further. Moreover, Monica changed her mind about med school at the last moment, leaving David to deal with it all alone. David, however, didn't waver and did get accepted to med school. Unfortunately, it was probably more out of spite towards his parents and Monica than out of a genuine desire to become a surgeon. At first, David struggled through his studies, cursing himself for rushing to give up on music. But when he finished his sophomore year, the situation changed for the better. David suddenly realized that there were still so many mysteries in medicine that no one would be able to uncover yet. Seeing that their son had finally become passionate about something specific, his parents breathed a sigh of relief and prepared themselves for having a medic in the family. That was the case until the moment when David ended up in his first ever autopsy conducted by a well-known city pathologist. It was during this seemingly complex and unpleasant process that the med student realized that he wanted to specialize in forensic medicine. David's mother was beyond surprised. "Son, you can't keep doing this. First you stopped pursuing music, now you're changing your mind about becoming a surgeon. What's next? Are you going to drop out of school and live on the street?" "Mom, come on, it's not like that. I'm not dropping out, I'm just changing my specialization. It's not that big of a deal," the young man retorted. However, in Samantha Miller's understanding, only someone with obvious mental problems could choose to become a forensic pathologist. Nevertheless, she couldn't convince her son to change his mind. Therefore, she had no choice but to accept his decision. David never crossed paths with Monica again and soon erased all memories of her from his mind. David's colleagues teased the young forensic pathologist, hinting that he devoted too much attention to dead people instead of spending more time with the living. But it wasn't easy to get David to lose his composure. After the extremely painful breakup with Monica, the phlegmatic and thoughtful young man was in no hurry to tie his life to anyone. He wanted to be completely sure of his interests' feelings first. Sure, he had some relationships in his life. However, none of them ever led to anything serious. David's parents kept pestering him about grandchildren, but David was consumed by work, which took up more and more of his time with each passing day. Being an excellent specialist in his field, he didn't just understand the intricacies of death, but also provided valuable advice to those investigating the circumstances of someone's demise. The police valued David for his input and always sought to maintain a friendly relationship with the forensic expert of his caliber. Fortunately, facing the manifestations of human cruelty every day, the young forensic pathologist learned to trust only the facts and nothing else. Those who knew David for years were used to his highly professional approach to body examination. This didn't just allow him to precisely determine the cause of death, but also gave him important clues for the identification of the murder. That day was no different. The body of a young woman in her 30s was delivered to the Center of Forensic Medicine. However, the accompanying documents already stated the presumed cause of the woman's death. A heart attack? At this age? No, something's definitely off here. David whispered and looked again at the body lying on the table. At that moment, one of the orderlies working in the morgue's reception area peeked into the autopsy room. Looking at David with clear concern on his face, he said, "Mr. Davis, sir, I forgot to tell you, it was the deceased husband who brought the body to the morgue." The forensic pathologist frowned. "So what, Billy? What does that have to do with anything in this case?" The orderly hesitated for a moment and then replied, "Well, her husband is a well-known businessman who personally knows the director of our center. Basically, he asked us not to perform an autopsy and to prepare the body for burial." David scowled. Since when can relatives of the deceased influence the work of forensic pathology? I believe that the decision in this case should be made by the specialist and no one else. The orderly nodded readily and rushed to leave the autopsy room. David then took the scalpel and approached the deceased woman on the table. Her skin was fair and quite rosy, which immediately puzzled the forensic pathologist. God, I'd never seen anything like this before. So lifelike. His hand holding the scalpel trembled, and the blade only slightly grazed the woman's skin. He saw blood, and then the woman's hand moved slightly. Despite the movement being almost imperceptible, David immediately noticed it. Dear God, she's alive. Pulse. Does she have a pulse? Echoed in David's mind. Hoping to find the woman's heartbeat, the forensic pathologist retrieved a stethoscope from the cabinet and placed it on the left side of her chest. It seemed impossible, but there was no heartbeat. Meanwhile, the woman's hand twitched again, while her plump lips trembled slightly. David placed the stethoscope on the right side of her chest and distinctly heard the heartbeat. Only then did the forensic pathologist realize his mistake. The woman's heart was on the right side, an extremely rare anomaly that occurs in 1 out of several thousands of people. Despite encountering this for the first time, David didn't continue the examination and urgently summoned a team of resuscitators who promptly removed the patient from the morgue. The case turned out to be so unique that it almost instantly made headlines in the local newspapers. It was later revealed that the woman, Amanda Gomez, had not suffered a heart attack at all. The cause of her condition was a plant-based poison that entered her system through food. The person responsible for it was identified quite quickly. It turned out to be Amanda's husband, who had been having an affair for quite some time. Facing the possibility of losing half of his assets in a divorce from his legal wife, George Gomez found an alternative solution to his problem. He faced a tough choice: lose a significant portion of his wealth or deal with his wife problem more radically. George chose the latter and purchased a vial of poison on the black market. The seller assured him that the poison would act almost instantly and leave no trace in the victim's blood after half an hour. However, either the poison was of poor quality or the clumsy husband miscalculated the dose, but Amanda woke up in the morgue just a minute before her autopsy. Of course, this case had its fair share of coincidences that seemed like acts of divine intervention. If David hadn't paid attention to the color of the woman's skin and hadn't decided to check her heartbeat, things could have ended quite tragically. But they didn't, and Amanda was discharged from the hospital just a week later, after receiving a course of intensive therapy. George Gomez did get his divorce. However, he wouldn't be getting to spend time with his lover. Instead, he'd be spending quite a long time serving his sentence in the state penitentiary. Meanwhile, there was no telling if his lover would wait for him until he got out. Seeing that her son had become famous, David's mother finally changed her attitude towards his profession and expressed her admiration for him for the first time in several years. Meanwhile, David didn't waste any time and invited the woman he saved out on a date. Rumor had it that the couple was going to have a great future together, and it was hard to argue with that, especially considering that Amanda believed that David was her guardian angel and there were no random events in life, that everything always happened for a reason.